Hey guys, Rebel Engine 95, recording live from Luke County Prison Cell, and it's been a minute. So right now, this is the situation we're in. Okay, so we've had Cole McGrath and Alex Mercer announced, and we've had Bill Cipher versus Discord announced. Right. The reason I haven't made any prediction videos on those is because we haven't been given a release date, and I don't know what order they're in. Right. I've looked it up on. I've looked at every resource I could. We haven't been given a release date, to my knowledge, unless it's on some section of Death Battle Cast that I didn't see. So I don't want to make a video for both of them and then wait like 4 weeks for one of those videos to get, to get any traction, right? So I'd rather just make them a few weeks before the actual episode comes out. So my intent was originally. I was kicking a few ideas around. I was even thinking about going live. Maybe that's something I can do, and that might be a good thing to do. I don't know what the hell I would do other than just talk while we were, But my idea was like, okay, I'll just release a couple of regular videos in between, and of course, as always, life takes over. So not something I was able to do. This is actually being done kind of in the middle of the night, so it's not, this isn't optimal for me either. It's just the time I could find to do it. But, yeah, but now I'm just gonna do a regular video. So I have a few more ideas I want to get done, but there's this one I was thinking about. I even pushed it aside to do it, but I saw it and I'm like, you know what? That's really fucking cool. We're already a minute in. Yeah, okay. So this is Pumpkinhead from the Pumpkinhead franchise, the horror movie franchise, and the Crow from the Crow graphic novels and I guess film. Probably they'd probably use some degree of stuff from the film if it's relatable. But yeah, no, this is actually pretty cool. It's the what is it, the Demon of Vengeance versus the Spirit of Vengeance. It's two beings that can't leave the earth and are essentially immortal unless they've finished their unfinished business. That sort of thing. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool idea. And at first I thought like, well, there's no way that's gonna work because, well, for reasons I'll get into. But I think we can find a way to make this work. So we'll start with Pumpkinhead because that's what the thumbnail says, and that's the order I introduced them. So Pumpkinhead is the demonic being summoned from the witch Haggis, who we don't technically have an explanation for of how old she is or why she does this, but she's an old, is she like a bayou witch, I think? Yeah, she's an old, like, southern witch that whenever somebody comes in and says, she'll make a deal with them and summon Pumpkinhead to kill someone specific that they want to kill, right? It's usually, again, it's for whenever somebody feels, hate within their heart for a very specific individual, usually for revenge, right? They can go to her, she'll summon Pumpkinhead, and the contract will be formed. That contract is that Pumpkinhead, the creature, and the person that summoned them will be kind of linked together, and the person that they've swore revenge against will be marked. Pumpkinhead will never stop hunting for that marked person. The only time it'll stop is that it will kill anyone who tries to help that person from being killed. Right? It will intentionally kill anyone that tries to help that person. Right? And the other caveat, and this is actually what I think makes it a pretty heads-up horror film as far as, the over-cluttered horror film industry at the time goes, is that the villain isn't just, or the victim isn't just those who it's hunting. The victim is also the person that summoned Pumpkinhead, because, like I said, Pumpkinhead and the summoner will be psychically linked, and the summoner will witness every time Pumpkinhead kills somebody. They'll get, flashes of, and see through Pumpkinhead's eyes every time it kills somebody, as if it was them doing it. And in addition, the creature itself, which I'll get into more of the powers in a second, but this is kind of relevant to the story here. The creature can't feel pain, but the summoner feels any pain that the creature would. Right? So bullets don't affect it. Like, I don't even think bullets actually go through it, but if you shoot the creature, the summoner feels as though they've been shot. If you stab him, it won't do anything, but the summoner feels it. So the summoner is also the victim, as well as the person who is being... So again, it's a curse, right? And I think the primary person you would use is probably the protagonist of the first movie, Eddie Hardy. I think that's his name, Eddie Hardy, I think? I don't know. His name's Eddie. You would use him as your, probably the prime example, because he is, I think, the only recurring character in the series. There's actually been multiple Pumpkinhead creatures, but the first and third, and I think the rest of there's only the one that was in the one film, and the rest of them were the same guy. So you would use the one that's appeared the most. Now, as for the actual creature's ability, the creature's superhumanly strong, able to lift, I think it was able to lift a truck, so it's able to lift like 7 tons. It's been able to break through walls, just slash, rip through human torsos with ease, rip people's heads off. It's been able to, just, tear through steel and everything. It's essentially, it cannot die a regular death. The only way for it to be killed is for the summoner to be killed, which happened when Eddie shot himself to kill the beast, but through a strange twist of fate, he was actually there was some additional process to the ritual that meant Eddie wasn't, like, he couldn't kill himself to kill the creature or something like that. Yeah, because he survives, he comes back, so, even though he tried to kill himself. But yeah, the creature's completely invulnerable to any form of harm, right? It's actually, it's more akin to a healing factor, but it apparently bullets don't actually work, like bullets don't actually go through it. It's deceptively smart, but it is like a monster. It's not like a thinking creature. It's like blocked off people's escape routes and before. So it's more like a clever hunter. And then probably the most argumentative ability it has is its ability to bring storms, because every time the creature appears, a storm begins, right? Again, I don't think that's anything proven or explicitly stated in the films. I think that's just, that's like the Jason with the teleporting. Like, it's not something that he can actually do, it's just kind of inference. It's very possible that a storm just happened to show up every time the creature, showed up. But yeah, no, so that's the Pumpkinhead monster. Chilling, certainly, but, and to, use a Deadpoolzilla, phrase here, the same could be said for his opponent, the Crow. Now, the Crow is technically refers to multiple things. The Crow refers to the actual bird itself, which is used as the link between the spirit world and the world of the living. The Crow is the godlike figure that actually brings the people back from death. And the Crow is also the kind of, the persona of the individual who is brought back, right? And as regards to the individual, there's been like 20 different crows. I was going to have this fight be titled Pumpkinhead versus Eric Draven, but Eric Draven's only one of the crows, though he is kind of like the you know prime example of the character. So you would probably use him, but just so everyone's aware, there's like 20 different ones, and you could, theoretically apply what any of them do to any individual. So which crow it happens to be doesn't really make a difference unless you want to say Brandon Lee's, Jeet Kune Do fighting is a canonical part of the series, which in the comics it isn't. Well, let's get into the backstory. So Eric Draven was a newlywed. In the film, he was a musician. In the original, I think he was just a guy. He was a newlywed who his wife Shelley and he were going on the side of the road, and the car breaks down, of course, and a bunch of bikers come and try to carjack them. They shoot Eric in the head, which doesn't kill him immediately, but it paralyzes him, and that forces him to watch Shelley's rape and murder. Right? He dies several hours later in a hospital bed, but a year later is brought back by the spirit of vengeance, the Crow, the god, not the bird or him yet. And he becomes the Crow, him, not the bird or the god. So, due to being reanimated, he gains very specific abilities. He gains pretty much complete invulnerability and immortality, right? He cannot be killed by conventional means. He has an insane healing factor. He's had holes blown in him. I think he even had fingers or whatever cut off in the comic, and they just grow right back, which implies that if he got beheaded or something, it would probably just grow back. Yeah, he's just he's got an absurd healing. It's a magical healing factor, so he can't really be killed through physical means, right? And in addition to that, he can also, the bird, the Crow, the bird, not the god or him, can, because it's his guide to the living world, he can actually telepathically communicate with that crow, and cats apparently. That's just a very weird an additional power that any cats he can also communicate with. And he also sees through the bird's eyes. So, however, the bird follows him wherever he goes, so it's not like he can have the bird stay on the other side of the world and just watch what's going on. It actually has to be within the vicinity of him. But the bird follows him everywhere, so the bird's always within, a certain perimeter of him. However, the downside to that is that if the bird is harmed or killed, he loses that immortality, right? He doesn't just die immediately, but he's able to be hurt now. And he also receives any injury like the bird receives, but it's weird that if the bird dies, he doesn't die. He just stops being immortal. But yeah, so Eric Draven specifically, and again, that's the one I'll focus on. He had, spent pretty much the entirety of his graphic novel run just brutally murdering everybody who was involved with, with his wife's murder. And there was even a point where he couldn't figure out why he wasn't able to return to the afterlife after killing everyone. And of course that had to do with because the idea is that you get brought back to life to, avenge the great wrong. It's whenever you hold a great, sorrow within you that you're able to get brought back and avenge, whatever you feel. Right? And he wasn't able to find out why he wasn't returning, and it was because he blamed himself for Shelley's death, right? So he couldn't truly avenge her death in his eyes. That's just a side note. That's not really related to his powers or anything. But it is actually, there are a few things. So the healing factor, for some reason, apparently does not work against self-harm or drug use. Anything that he is intentionally doing or voluntarily doing to himself, like, so he's, like, worn a crown of thorns that wouldn't stop making him bleed, or he's even, cut himself, unfortunately. But then the other thing, and this is actually relevant, he gains this weird ability of, like, psychic kind of, like, pain transfer. Like, so whenever there's great pain or, like, sadness attached to a person, he doesn't take it from them per se, but he can kind of experience that himself involuntarily most of the time. So if he approaches, like, a rape victim, he can experience what they experienced. And this even works with, like, objects that were relevant to it. Like, he touched picture frames that had, that were in the room when, something terrible has happened. And he's seen he's actually seen the event. And he experiences all of the same pain and, like, all of the emotion and all of the, like, sadness attached to it. He experiences that firsthand. And why would that be relevant, you might ask? Well, he can actually transfer that pain to, I don't know if he can transfer it to anyone, or can he transfer, I think he can transfer it to anyone. I don't think he just has to transfer it to, like, the one who caused it, or the guilty one, because, I believe he only ever did it, I think, to T-Bird. He might have done it more in the comic run after the initial run, but he did it to T-Bird, but T-Bird was not directly, like, the one who caused the, Shelley's murder. So in the movie anyway, T-Bird was kind of just like another guy in the book. But, like, T-Bird was unrelated, I think, to the thugs, if I'm remembering correctly. So I think he can just cause that specific amounts of pain and sadness and of specific memories to just individual people. I think the only caveat's probably that they'd be guilty of something. So that's actually, now, you might say, well, you said that the Pumpkinhead can't feel pain. Well, we'll get to that. So, in this fight, right, I don't think it's any exaggeration to say Eric is outmatched. And again, it shouldn't matter what crow you use, because they should all be theoretically capable of just about the same, right? So, Eric is outmatched here. He's physically outmatched in terms of strength, in terms of damage output and all that. But it should be, in theory, a draw, right? Because they're both immortal, right? They're both unkillable through conventional means. If anything, Eric would have the weakness of the bird being there, but like I said, the bird isn't, like, Pumpkinhead's not so smart that I think he would he wouldn't assume to go kill the bird, right? What is more likely, right? What is more likely is if we have the individual who summoned Pumpkinhead, right? And Pumpkinhead does tend to stay around the individual that summoned it, right? It's not like, in fact, I think even after the person who he wants to kill, like, it doesn't just go away once the person who you want to kill dies. He just keeps killing things. So I think he is kind of stuck with it. So it is reasonable to assume that the person who summoned him would be there, right? Or at least would be in the area. And remember what I said about the pain that Pumpkinhead would feel being transferred to the individual. Now, again, this is kind of storytelling, but it's necessary to have a reasonable conclusion here, because otherwise eventually Eric would lose just due to the crow eventually getting killed at some point. Right? That's the only real possibility of one of them dying, otherwise it just goes on forever. Right? But if the person who summons Pumpkinhead is present, right? I think what's more likely than the bird getting killed is Eric noticing that any time he tries to hurt Pumpkinhead, it hurts the summoner. In that case, Eric can kill the summoner, and then Pumpkinhead will die. And this is actually technically even more likely due to the fact that even if Pumpkinhead kills the bird, he still has to then go and kill Eric. Like, Eric doesn't automatically die if the bird is killed. He just stops being, he just becomes vulnerable. So now you're saying, well, what's more likely? One guy getting killed, and that's to assume that he wouldn't get killed in the crossfire somehow. Let's say it's Ed, That's to say Ed wouldn't get killed in the crossfire somehow. So I think it's more likely that Eric would notice, especially if he tries to use the pain transference, and then he hears, Ed screaming in the background, holding his head or something, saying, make it stop, make it stop. Then he'll probably say they're connected, right? So I think that's probably the likely scenario, is that Eric would take this due to that one instance. And like I said, these are pretty much the only one way that one of these characters wins, because they're both immortal, essentially, right? Eric would probably just keep getting killed over and over, but it wouldn't truly end the fight. And yeah, Pumpkinhead can be re-summoned, but the monster itself does die at the, definitively until that happens. So it's not really, it does still qualify, I think, as a death battle at that point. But there's two scenarios that these characters die. It's that the crow gets killed and then Eric gets killed, or it's that Ed gets killed. And I think Ed getting killed is the more likely scenario in most cases. If they, for some reason, well, first of all, I don't think they would do this fight just because of the amount of variables you'd have to put in. But if they did this fight and they said Ed wasn't present for some reason, or the person who summoned Pumpkinhead wasn't present for some reason, then you just give Pumpkinhead an auto win by means of not being able to die. So, okay, but, I think what would likely happen if they were to do this fight would be that they would have the summoner be present, they would have the crow be present. Because it's also that's kind of thematic, because the summoner and Pumpkinhead are linked, and then the crow and Eric are linked, or the crow and the crow are linked. So it would make sense that you would have them both be present, since the crow has to be present, the bird, not Eric. Yeah, but this was actually a fight I kind of wanted to get done, because it was sort of interesting to me. But yeah, I'll try to get another one done probably by next week. No promises though, and of course they can have it announced whenever they reveal a release date. I'll probably do a prediction video. But anyway, for Blender 95, see ya.